continue to smash that like button. We got a lot of football talk. And in this segment, it's for University of Michigan football. Shout out to Mike G in the chat. He says Sharon didn't do enough in the portal at O-line and at quarterback. And yes, it would have pissed off kids in that room, but who cares? And honestly, for me, a lot of the kind of optimism that I had, it had to do with the fact that I believed Sharon Moore. He had some hype with some of the things that he was doing in the offseason, the coaching, some of the moves that he did do to bring and try and bolster this. And I believed that we were going to get enough out of Alex Orji, and for it to be kind of this exponential swing the other way, where I don't even know if we're going to get anything, and that realistically we're sitting here with a Davis Warren as potentially the best option to just kind of keep the train moving down the tracks, has been absolutely disappointing. And then for it to come at the hands of a bludgeoning by Texas football, man.
And it's a good point that Mike G made, because last year you were returning Trevor Keegan, you were returning Zach Zinter, but you still went out and got Nugent and Ladarius Henderson and Miles Hinton in the transfer portal. And this year, all you did, despite losing all of your starters, was going to get Josh Preby, which I think is going to end up being a good get, and I think it has been so far. But you've got a young, relatively inexperienced, especially compared to past Michigan teams, offensive line. You've got a quarterback in Davis Warren who, let's just be honest, probably shouldn't even start at Eastern Michigan. Maybe he could start at Wayne State. Not trying to disrespect Wayne State or anything, but he is not somebody who should be...
Shout out Rod Beard and Wayne State.
Absolutely. Shout out Joyke Bell, our old friend Joyke Bell. But you know what I mean. Like, Davis Warren, it's just not acceptable. And I fully believe, and this is something that I almost have to believe, because I don't think that Sharon Moore's incompetent or anything like that. And I think that they thought as a coaching staff that Alex Orji was going to take that step, that he was going to, I would say, clean some things up with his throwing, because last year they trusted Alex Orji in some really high leverage moments to run the football. And we know what he can do in that regard, especially when the defense doesn't know it's coming, which never happened against Texas, by the way. And honestly, if you want to talk about the Michigan-Texas game, one of the biggest differences in that game, a game in which Michigan didn't even look like they belonged on the same field, is that Texas has an NFL quarterback in Quinn Ewers who played phenomenally. Michigan has Davis Warren and an Alex Orji who can't beat Davis Warren out, which is a major, major indictment on its own.
Yep, and I got a quick question for you, because that's where a lot of my optimism was. Not that the Wolverines didn't have deficiencies that they would have to figure out, but I thought that if Alex Orji was as dynamic as was billed, that I thought him, along with some of the kind of the upperclassmen they still have here that have that national championship experience and could make big plays, I thought that was going to be enough for this team to not get punched in the face over and over and over again by Texas. Another brand that's been trying for a while to say that we're back, and to be able to punch Michigan in the face at the big house on national TV with game day here, that doesn't go over well in recruiting, especially for a guy like Sharon Moore, who right now it's looking like he is Javi Baez whiffed. Look at where they're headed, man.
Well,
I just, man.
Don't bring up Javi Baez in this. That's I get it. I get it.
I'm sorry.
No. I get it. But I want to, before I pass it over to Broder, I want to take this conversation in a slightly different direction, because this is where I can combine two of my favorite loves in the world, Michigan football and PFF, but I kind of have to use it against Michigan this time.
Help me. Talk me off the ledge.
This isn't exactly what I'm going to be doing, what my intention is.
Just jump. Just jump.
When you look at the PFF big board for right now for the 2025 NFL draft, when you look at the PFF big board top 150, Texas has 5, Michigan has 7. And that's one of the reasons why I thought that even against Texas that they would be able to acquit themselves better, because they've got NFL talent all across the board. One thing that I was disappointed in with this game is that, for the most part, the NFL players, even the projected top 5 picks, did not play very well. The only one who did was Will Johnson, who, despite giving up some plays in the previous week, Texas just didn't go at him. They targeted him once. He gave up 1 catch for 6 yards. But that also left Jair Hill on an island to get absolutely torched that game. He gave up 7 for $103. And speaking of NFL guys, Wink Martindale. Looking a little bit too much like Wink Brown or Don Martindale. I'm just saying. One of Don Brown's hallmarks was leaving inferior corners up against wide receivers.
And sending everybody.
One of my worst memories was what Paris Campbell did to Michigan in the 2018 Michigan-Ohio State game when OSU put up 62. I don't like seeing Jair Hill get absolutely torched like that. He was in matchups that he just couldn't win, didn't belong in. And it wasn't. But to further that point on the NFL guys, where Texas's more so thrived and Michigan's didn't, let's look at the pass catchers. Both teams have a first-round projected pass catcher. Texas has Isaiah Bond. He had 3 for 51. Colston Loveland, he fumbled a football without even being touched. You can't have that happen.
Gosh.
That was a moment in the game where
one of your leaders.
Absolutely. That was a moment in the game where, despite Michigan being thoroughly dominated, had a chance down 17-3 to go get a score before half and then get the ball first coming out of halftime, and then it's a game. Instead, Colston Loveland fumbles when he's about to pick up a first down on 3rd and 11 and just gives the ball right back to Texas. They go down and score. It's 24-3 at halftime, and it is over. Another two people who I think need to get some criticism for the game are the interior defensive linemen Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham. Mason Graham doesn't look like a top 5 pick so far this year, and Kenneth Grant doesn't look like a top 15 pick. And Texas, who has an NFL tackle, one of the best tackles in the country, and an offensive line that has started a bunch of games together, they won that matchup. I thought that at the very least that Texas's interior offensive line would struggle against Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham, and they did not. Texas ran for over 140 yards on 4.5 per carry. Quinn Ewers barely got sniffed on that whole game. He didn't get sacked. It absolutely cannot happen. Texas also has a couple of NFL caliber defensive backs. One of theirs, Macumba, I believe he's the safety. He got one of the picks on Davis Warren to when Michigan was down 14-3. And then that fumble, Colston Loveland, that unforced fumble was recovered by their other NFL defensive back. What's his name? His name is Barron. He's a cornerback, Jahdae Barron. But before I give it over to Broder, I also have to save some of my wrath for another Michigan guy, one of their heralded transfers. Jayshon Barham's been awful this year. He was absolutely terrible in that game. I was told...
Stop giggling over there, Sparty.
And that's fine. I was told in preseason camp, and I was kind of promised that he was Devin Bush, but bigger. In that game, PFF listed Jayshon Barham against Texas as the worst defensive player on the field for Michigan.
Devin Bush, but bigger, bro.
He looks like Tarzan, but played like Jane in that game. He looked out of position. He looked slow. Running backs were catching balls out of the flat. Gunnar Helm, Texas's tight end, was the best receiver in that game. It was just not a good performance by him. And of course, Donovan Edwards continues to disappoint. So I guess the moral of the story is that, yes, Michigan has a quarterback problem, but they need to rely on their NFL talent in games like this to step up and play big. And the only one who did was Will Johnson. Everybody else disappointed to some extent. And
it was just, I'm going to throw it over to Broder real quick, but it was just even more so the identity. If your quarterback is going to be broken, what did we say was going to help Alex Orji through the season? The fact that we know we can rely on the Michigan run game and Sharon Moore's play calling, and that we saw him do this last year. Maybe some mojo was gone from last year with those players that left. Because I believe, look, especially after the first game, maybe they can at least get 100 yards on the ground, 150 on the ground, and give themselves the ability to slow down the pace, slow down the time, try and control a little bit more of the time of possession, because that was the only chance that they had, in my opinion, and they couldn't get anything going on the floor. And just real quick, this narrative that, and I see you, Eric Allen, Moore is a patsy for the next season or two before they bring in a high-end coach that can bring in higher-end talent. Bro, this is on Sharon Moore. You got the opportunity. You have the opportunity. Yeah. You got to go out there and cash in. Don't sit back and be anybody's patsy. Yep. You got the opportunity to go out there and ball. When you're on the floor and the ball is in your hands, you can't talk about anything else that's happened. If you think that you're the man, you have to go out there and do work. Do work. That's just the fabric of this stuff, man.
Broder, what did you see from that game? I know we were all disappointed, but what was the problem?
Yeah, it's so funny that you went to the defensive end, because I know I put the quarterback question in the show sheet. The offense was a question mark before the season, and they haven't answered a single question yet this season. But to me, I was disappointed in the defense. Texas, they're going to be national championship contenders, but you still expect a defense with this much high-end talent to at least I don't know, keeping the game close is the right phrase, but at least keep it competitive, not let them, let's just call a spade, embarrass you at the big house. They played Michigan's game against Michigan and ran it all over them. And then Quinn Ewers could do whatever he wants. He's an NFL quarterback, or at least will get drafted to the NFL. So the defense, it disappointed me. Looking long term, though, what troubles me is that they haven't, and I know there's been controversy surrounding the program, and maybe what I'm about to say leads back to Jim Harbaugh's flirting with the NFL, lack of decision-making, whatever it is. They haven't used the national championship or used the Michigan brand or used all the benefit of Michigan football to their advantage to have a well of talent ready to come in after they lose 18 players, 13 starters, to come in and maybe not be at the level they were at the national championship level, but to really not have much of a drop-off. This team, I thought they were going to drop off a little bit, but that it would still be a 10 or 11 win team.
Mm-hmm.
I still think they have a shot to make the playoff because if you have 2 losses, you'll get in. They're at risk of losing 3 or more, and you can say or more after we've seen them play these first 2 games.
Well, and I know that it's a little bit of hindsight because I wasn't as worried about the quarterback situation as I now am. I will admit it with new information.
I'm right there with you.
You're allowed to change your
100%.
opinion. This would have actually been the perfect year for a nice bridge quarterback to get us to Jaden Davis.
Yes.
Because Michigan actually does have some quarterbacks in the 24 class, 25, and 26 that are promising. It looks like the quarterback position, at least on paper, will be improved in the coming years. But this season, with all of the talent that they have, especially on the defensive side of the football, and even having a guy like Colston Loveland, and hell, even Donovan Edwards for that regard, a good quarterback might have made this team, I wouldn't want to say like favorites to repeat, but at least almost like a no-doubt playoff team. That team that we saw on Saturday is losing 5 or 6 games. I hate to say it, but with their schedule, especially with USC all of a sudden looking like a really, really tough game, it's tough. It's unfortunate. I will say this. It does make it a little bit easier knowing that Michigan won the national championship last year. If they didn't, I would be on I would probably be in a padded cell room in a straitjacket right now. But as is, I'm more content than I usually am after blowout losses like this, but it was certainly sobering. If there's anything that can get me out of my national championship haze, it's getting beat down by 20 at home against Texas.
And see, that's what I think it is right there. I think you guys just finally answered that age-old question of, would you give up the next, 2 to 3 seasons if you can sit here and say, hey, we won that natty? And I think you're getting that answer as it is right now. As Broder said, I don't think Michigan as a whole has that luxury of Alabama or all these SEC teams that can sit here and just reload after you lose so many players to the NFL, that you don't have that luxury now. You actually have to kind of start to rebuild this thing right back up again and have those quality players ready to go as soon as someone either hits the transfer portal or decides just to leave and commit to the NFL. But hey, like I said, you answered that question. Hey, would you give up the next 2-3 seasons for a natty? You're looking at it right now.
Then to just be like a relevant 10-2 team every year and not get a national championship, yes, I would take that. I would take that trade. Yes.
But if it's on the trajectory of like 5 or 6 losses, it gets a little tough by year 2 or 3 if that's where the trend goes. And then you got to think, what are your recruits doing? And just a quick question before we get into this next segment with the Lions. What do they do? And I'm not, the answer can't be, Alex Orji and Davis Warren are going to figure out as quarterback. I don't expect that. But what do they do to salvage at this point, the rest of the season ahead and be able to cash in on some of those early season expectations?
I think it depends on the big dogs. Mason, and I saw people push back a little bit on my Mason Graham criticism. He has not played poorly. I think you could argue that Kenneth Grant has, but Mason Graham has played fine. But what you need is better from him. You need better from Kenneth Grant. You need a lot better from Jayshon Barham. You need better from Donovan Edwards. And you need Colston Loveland to not fumble the ball without being touched. And that's not too much to ask. These are guys who are going to be drafted in the 2025 draft. Multiple of them are going to be drafted in the first round. That is what's going to carry this team through. The big dogs got a big dog. There are some deficiencies. I know that's a lot to ask of some players, but if you're going to be, like in the case of Will Johnson and Mason Graham, projected top 5 picks, you got to play like it. Will Johnson did that on Saturday, but nobody else did who's going to be drafted for Michigan this upcoming year.
Yep. And I don't think the criticism was too much. I believe in a year like this, where you needed those guys to look like NFL players out there, that's what you have to see every single game this season, or else it can get bad.